40 Inconvenient Truths of Global Warming Alarmism. The head of the IPCC, Dr. Rajendra Pachauri, has no background in climate science. His PhD is in economics and he has worked as a railway engineer before becoming head of the IPCC. Only 52 scientists contributed to the 2007 IPCC summary for policymakers, although diplomats from over 115 countries contributed. A paper that became a key reference source for the IPCC's claim that the effect of urban warming in eastern China was negligible. It turned out that 49 of the 84 climate monitoring stations used for the report had no history of their locations at all, meaning no one could verify where the data came from. This included 40 of the 42 rural stations. Of the rest, no fewer than 18 had been moved during the study period to warmer urban areas. When the source data was re-examined, it was found that urbanization was responsible for 40% of the warming previously reported and claimed for as evidence for man-made global warming. When asked to independently review the IPCC's last two reports on claimed sea level rises, the reviewing scientist was astonished to find that not one of their 22 contributing authors was a sea level specialist. Up until 2003, the IPCC's satellite-based evidence showed no upward trend in sea level, so the IPCC used an increase of 2.3 millimeters recorded on a single Hong Kong harbor tide gauge to claim a global sea level increase of 2.3 millimeters. The IPCC's now retracted claim that the Himalayan glaciers were melting was derived from nothing more scientific than a phone interview with someone who wasn't even a scientist. The IPCC's now retracted claims that man-made global warming would lead to increasing numbers of natural disasters, such as Katrina-scale hurricanes, was based on an unpublished report that had not been subject to critical peer review. The IPCC's now retracted claim that man-made global warming was going to result in deficiencies of up to 50% in African agriculture was also based on a non-peer-reviewed claim in a scientific paper. The IPCC's now retracted claim that up to 40% of the Amazonian rainforest could react drastically to even a slight reduction in rainfall was based on a non-peer-reviewed, non-scientific paper. The IPCC's claim that 55% of the Netherlands was below sea level rather than the actual 26% has now been retracted. According to the United States Historical Climatology Network, 90% of U.S. climate monitoring surface stations have been found to be poorly situated, meaning that they have a margin of error greater than 1 degree centigrade, which is huge in climatology terms. In 1978, there were 6,000 climate monitoring surface stations. Today, there are only about 1,200. The vast majority of lost climate monitoring stations were sited in rural areas, meaning that overall results are distorted upwards due to a much greater percentage of such stations being located in urban areas, often on top of warm office blocks. Carbon dioxide contributes only 4.2% to 8.4% of greenhouse gas effect. Only approximately 4% of carbon dioxide is actually man-made. Water vapor accounts for between 90% and 95% of greenhouse gas effect. An estimated 99.99% of water vapor is natural, meaning that no amount of deindustrialization could get rid of it. There have been many times when the temperature of the planet has been higher than it is now. These include the medieval warming period, the Holocene, and the Jurassic periods. An Antarctic ice core sample proved that increases in carbon dioxide follow increases in temperature by about 800 years, not precede them as claimed by the IPCC. A leading figure in the ClimateGate scandal now admits that there has been no statistically significant global warming since 1995. 2008 and 2009 were the two coolest years of the decade, neither of which are likely to be as cold as 2010. During the Ordovician period, carbon dioxide concentrations were 12 times higher than what they are now, yet the temperature was lower. Solar activity is highly correlated with temperature change. Studies show that half of all recent warming was solar in cause. The planet Mars has warmed by about half a degree centigrade since the 70s, which is about as much as the Earth over the same period. As far as we are aware, there is no industry on that planet. The 0.7 degree centigrade increase in temperature over the last century is entirely consistent with well-established long-term climate trends. The distance between the Earth and the Sun varies, thus affecting the amount of of heat energy the Earth receives. Earth's axial tilt oscillates between 21.4 degrees and 24.8 degrees, which affects the distribution of the sun's energy across its surface. Antarctica, 90% of the Earth's ice, and it is growing, not shrinking as claimed by the IPCC. The Arctic sea ice has now returned to its 1979 levels, which is when monitoring began. The Arctic ice caps have recovered from their loss in 2007. The Arctic is now 1 degree centigrade cooler than it was in the 1940s. Sea level 81,000 years ago was 1 meter higher than it is now, while carbon dioxide levels were lower. According to satellite data, sea level has been decreasing since 2005. Instead of damaging forests, the increased level of carbon dioxide has been helping them grow. Some climate scientists argue that urban warming is responsible for half of the global warming trend from 1980 to 2002. According to a leaked ClimateGate email, temperatures recorded in Darwin, Australia were shown to be falling 0.7 degrees centigrade per century, but after IPCC homogenization, they were recorded as increasing at 1.2 degrees centigrade per century. It is alleged by Russian scientists that Britain's Hadley Climate Research Unit cherry-picked climate data from just 25% of Russia's surface weather monitoring stations, thereby overstating Russia's warming by a very significant 2/3 of a degree centigrade for the period between the 1870s and 1990s. It is alleged that Britain's Hadley Climate Research Unit, the body at the center of ClimateGate, threw out the original temperature data that could have been re-examined to verify its findings because it claimed it did not have storage space. The owners of the trading floor where the carbon credits will be traded allegedly include Goldman Sachs and Al Gore, stand to make trillions of dollars if cap and trade is passed by the U.S. administration.